All right, good morning. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. I last night, shortly after the markets closed into the evening a little bit, all of the headlines on the various news outlets started to publish headlines that were, to the tune of Iran retaliation. Iran strikes launches a missile strike against U.S. bases in Iraq. And some of it pretty damning. And the market reacted heavily here, and you can see S&P futures. Let me just put it to a 1 minute chart to show you what S&P futures did. They started to drop, and they dropped, but there was no more information. The only information that was out was the information that Iran had sent out to the world, that they had fired tens of missiles, and this was their great retaliation towards the great Satan, and that they're not going to be messed with, and all this other kind of verbiage. But there were no reports about the strike and casualties or anything like that. And then we saw futures continue to drop as the silence was almost deafening. And I was talking to my brother, and I said, "Look, we're not seeing updates to this story. If there was an attack and there were casualties, we'd see a swift response by the U.S. or something like that." Well, finally, we had a Pentagon official come out and say, "Yes, we know, we're aware of what's going on." And then we saw this move in futures right here, this snap back up. And I said to my brother, I said, "Nah, there were no casualties. There's no way there were casualties." This is something that was more for show than for effect. And as the night went on, it became very clear and obvious that was the case. We start to find out, and in fact, if we zoom in on futures, you can see they completely erased the loss. We start to find out that Iran had warned the U.S. of the missiles coming beforehand. What does that mean? Well, that means this was a show. This was an attempt to appease some of the tempers at home, without trying to escalate the conflict in a more severe military manner. So there are a lot of reports out on it here this morning. A lot of things going on. We're still awaiting a commentary from the U.S. president. President Trump did tweet late last night, all is well, blah, blah, blah. You can check that out. That he would be making a more formal statement here, here today. So it's an ongoing story. It's one that, has some really kind of interesting twists in it. If you look at things like oil spiked last night on this news, and you can see it is now trading lower. If you look at gold, same thing, spiked, trading lower, bouncing a little bit here in the last few minutes. But after all of this, we are looking at a market that's set to open flat. The S&P right now is set to open 1 point higher after all this. Now, another event occurred last night, and it is going to affect Boeing stock. There was a crash on a Boeing, with a Boeing plane just outside of, a Ukrainian plane just outside of Tehran. So details are still coming out on that. I don't know that you can really pin it on Boeing or anything like that yet with the information that's out there. But if you've ever traded Boeing stock, you know that anytime there's an airplane issue, Boeing stock drops, it's sell first, ask questions later, and that's what we're seeing with with Boeing stock. But overnight you look at kind of how some of these stocks traded, like Caterpillar. It traded all the way down to 144, and Disney dropped $3. I mean, we just saw stocks across the board cratering. But now, rebounding. In fact, many of them set to open higher here this morning, and a very fluid, ongoing situation. But I think if you're on the side of, hey, you know what, this is just going to be a verbal flare up, and that's it, because that's what the incentives for one of the sides is. Extreme incentive for one of the sides is, and the other side, isn't probably doesn't have the incentive to go all out war, but they're not going to hesitate a little bit of skirmish, right? And you have the two sides with those incentives, so likely you're not going to see anything blow in a big way. And I think last night, kind of proves that. We'll see what the U.S. response is here today. I think that's going to be very interesting and very key. But that's what's going on. That is what has happened here in the past 12 hours. About 15 hours here in the market, and is leading the markets to open now just slightly higher. We can see futures kind of moving as as I speak here. Now, we do have, we are waiting, various responses and everything that are going to come out here this morning. The challenge is in all cash. Hit the time stop on Disney yesterday, so had to take it and move on. Hopefully, we get an upside crossover that comes in on it here. In the near future, to be able to take advantage of the next move that I suspect is coming on the stock. Now, there were no new signals that were tradable yesterday. We did see a CSX signal, but with earnings here next week, just wasn't something I could trade with the options the way that they were. So we'll be looking for the next signals this morning. I will jump on video at an hour after the market opens. Should there be a new signal or a mass development in the market, either one of those situations, I'll jump on. If not, I will just put a post into the message feed showing the crossovers that are happening out there with a few comments. But if there is a signal, I will jump on video to make that trade. Thanks for hopping on. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.